Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, and adepts, to the next episode of Knights of the Nephilim podcast, brought to you by my company, Celestial Oddities Radio. As always, I am your tour guide on this mysterious and mystical journey that we call magic. I am Freighter Crow, and I want to thank you for listening tonight. Whether listening live or streaming or downloading this after the fact, make sure that you click the like, share, or follow buttons. The more that you do that, the more that it moves us up the podcast community rankings, more people that discover the show, and ultimately the more that we can continue to do with the show. It also keeps you in tune with all brand new episodes as they air, as well as allows you to jump through our past archives. That way you don't ever miss a thing. So I always encourage doing that. You can listen wherever you feel most comfortable. We are on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google Play, Amazon, you name it, we are on it. So listen where you feel most comfortable. But like I said, make sure that you go ahead and click those like, share, and follow buttons. That'll certainly bring you in touch with everything that we're doing here. We do bring you an episode 2 to 3 times per month. Thursday nights live, 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're always bringing on great, guests on the show, from occult authors to organizational leaders to ritual tool implement makers and everything in between. So there's always something that's going to be very interesting for you to hear about, things for you to learn no matter what theology or background you might be a part of. This show will help teach you something, and you'll always walk away with new perspectives. So I always encourage to check it out, share it around to your family and friends, and learn something. We're all here to do that. And I do, like I said, want to thank you for tuning in tonight. You could be anywhere, but you're here with us, so thank you so much. Do want to thank my sponsors, Goetic Impressions and Limitless Liberation, which we will jump into a little bit here later on the show. I do an individual spotlight of my sponsors where I talk about them in depth, but they are both companies that make amazing ritual tools for ceremonial magic and rituals. So it's something definitely to check out. I have work from both of them, and I got to be honest with you, it has really brought out a new aspect of my workings, and I encourage them and stand behind them. So if you think you're doing very well on your rituals, think you're doing a great job, but you feel like there's just something missing, I would definitely advise checking them out. They might be exactly what you've been looking for. So give them a follow and a like. I'll be giving them a spotlight later on tonight, like I said. If you've missed any of our past episodes, make sure you tune back and check them out. We've had some great episodes. We had the original introduction episode, which was just me talking a little bit about who I am, my background, and what the show would be pertaining. Then our first guest of the show we had was Martin McGregor, a author of satanic works. He has 2 different books out talking about the left-hand path and Satanism. We had a great interview with him. Following interview, we had S. Ben Kayan on talking about his brand of magic that he does. Very interesting with his work with the jinn. Certainly in other topics that we had touched as well. And then last episode, we had R.A. Vega, or Ra Vega, who is a ceremonial magician of many different backgrounds, not just the left-handed path. So we kind of touched base on both sides of that, which was always a fun thing to do. Because as I've always told you, I have definitely been a long-time left-hand path practitioner and Satanist, but I do certainly pull elements of other theologies and practices as well. So I always like talking about Hermeticism and other things of that nature. So tonight we have an amazing guest on the line with us, and I look forward to bringing him on, picking his brain, talking about his organization. I'm sure if you're listening out there, you're already aware of who we're bringing on, and that's why you're out listening. But tonight we have Thomas LeRoy. Now, Thomas LeRoy is the founder of the Left Hand Path organization, the Sect of the Horn God. He first entered the occult world back in the mid-1970s, having over the years studied a variety of practices from Satanism to Druidism to left-hand path Hinduism. He, along with his wife, Lisa Corinne, established the sect in 2011 in order to bring about a dialogue on the primal aspect of the left-hand path, not only from the historical, but also from the psychological aspects. Now, that's about him. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about his organization, and then we're going to go ahead and bring him on the line for one hell of an interview. The Sect of the Horn God is a dark pagan, atheistic, left-hand path organization dedicated to the destruction of faith. in all of its manifestations. We see faith as the root of all evil. There is not a single major example of man's inhumanity towards man that is not rooted in faith, be it the Holocaust, Stalin's purges, Jonestown, or 9/11. We use shock and awe to push the cause of reason and rational thought in order to awaken the masses. To quote Thomas LeRoy, founder of the Sect of the Horn God, faith is the ability to ignore your doubts. Since we in the sect lacked this ability, we in no way believe in an afterlife or reincarnation. Because of this truth, one must live life to the fullest. Now, there's a lot more about the organization that I could certainly touch base on, but why hear it from me when you can hear it from the man himself? Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas LeRoy. How you doing tonight, brother?
I am outstanding. I couldn't be much better. Actually, I'm great.
That's good to hear. It's always a good thing when you're doing great.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on, allowing me to pick your brain tonight, talk about your past and what makes you you, as well as certainly talk about your organization. Now, I'm very traditional in the fact of how I like to start my interviews out. I start them out as one always normally would with, who you are, what brought you to be the leader of this organization. But before we dive too much into the organization, I just want to talk a little bit about your upbringing. I mean, was it something growing up that you knew, from an early age that this was your route, this was something that you grew up in, or was this something that over the years you separated like most of us and kind of split away from the religions and things that we were taught as children into our own ideologies and own theologies? I mean, how did this transpire to get into the left-hand path first and foremost, and kind of tell us a little bit about your upbringing into the occult?
Well, like most people, I was raised Christian. Originally, I was Catholic, living with my mother. And then I spent some time with my grandmother, who was a Jehovah's Witness. You can kind of imagine what that was like. And then I spent 8 years in a foster home, and they were Lutherans. And all three of these theologies claimed to be the truth, but they were vastly different. Well, Catholicism and Lutherans weren't that different, but they were different enough. So as you can imagine, as a young man, I became highly skeptical. And because of that, I more or less let Christianity go by the wayside. But I was still a seeker, if you will, like a lot of people are. So I roughly, I guess about the age of 14, 15, something like that, I went looking. So I checked out like Wicca and Crowley and so on and so forth. Crowley was very confusing, especially for a young teenager. I did eventually start reading the works of Israel Regla, who basically translated Crowley in a sense, made him a little more palatable, understandable. And just going through it all, just checking out different forms of, let's say, magical practices or occult practices, I started to wonder, was I just replacing one faith with another faith? But at the same time, I was still drawn to it. So eventually, let me see, I guess I was about 18. I read the Satanic Bible. Now, I'm a San Francisco native. And as a child, my foster mother used to like to shop. I think it was a Sears store. And she would go down California Street. Now, there was a very sinister-looking black house on California Street in San Francisco. It's no longer there. And every time we drove past that house, she would mumble something. Until finally, one time she goes, "Tommy, an evil man lives in that house." So me being a creepy kid, I was intrigued by this evil man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, of course, the Bay Area, this evil man, Anton LaVey, was an institution, if you will. His books were all over. They were in all the bookstores. And I remember seeing that sigil of Baphomet. And how creepy it looked to me, and I was intrigued by it. Well, my late teens, I eventually picked it up and read it, and it clicked with me. It allowed me to have my doubts, if you will, and still practice the dark arts, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
And then, well, over time, I kept studying. I learned more about the path in general, left-hand path in general, and also what the path did. Just being awoken to the path, it kind of lit a fire under my ass. So what I did is, during the 80s, I played in rock bands, and then during the 90s, I went to Hollywood. I got bit parts in films and so on and so forth. But it was always in the back of my mind. It was always there. It was always a part of who I am. And then in the 90s, I started studying Druidism, but not this modern Druidism, if you will. Instead, Druidism from history, or as best we can get from history, because most of the history on Druids was written by the Romans. And from there, you have to try to extract the gems, if you will.
Absolutely.
And push aside the bullshit. So getting into Druidism, I became aware that there was a parallel between Druidism and Hinduism, which I found fascinating. And it's believed that there was a common ancient Indo-European root between these religions. One in Ireland and the other, Western Europe, and the other far off in the East. And that really intrigued me, that commonality. So from there, I got into the whole, stemmed the idea of the horn god archetype. Now, the parallels, for instance, there's blatant parallels between the Hindu Pashupati and the Celtic Chrononos. They're very, very similar, even though they span, millennia. There's very stark similarities, and also amongst the other gods. So the idea of a horn god intrigued me, and also we know what the Christians did to the horn god. They gave Satan the horn god's face, if you will, because Satan from Scripture and Hebrew or Christian mythology had no face, really. So they gave him the horn god face. And we're all aware of that, of course.
Absolutely.
So eventually, over time, I still, even though you don't practice steadily, you kind of take breaks from time to time. Life gets in the way. I had kids and my first marriage, and that broke up, and so on and so forth. And then, let me see, about 12 years ago, I found myself on MySpace, of all things, in some dark corner of MySpace filled with a bunch of occultic types. This is what I was drawn to. And in there, I met my wife, the woman who became my wife, Lisa Kareem. And eventually, she's Canadian. She was a dark pig, and we clicked. I wasn't even, to be honest with you, I wasn't looking. I was a happy single, if you will, but it was an opportunity too good, not to take up. So she came down here to California. We got married, all that stuff, and we were caretakers on a winery. We also owned a little bookstore. And while there, we also put on events, like heavy metal shows and different jazz or blues type concerts and all that good stuff. And then we decided to put on a pagan fest. Now, I wanted to put on something dark, but I knew it wouldn't go over well in small town California. So we did more or less a generic pagan fest with a couple of relatively well-known pagan authors. One of them, Diana Paxton, if you're familiar with her.
Yes.
She got she's written extensively on Icelandic magic and the runes and so on and so forth. She attended, And while there, now the people were great. I like the people, but their interpretation of the horn god wasn't how I saw the horn god. He seemed to be this neutered being, if you will, in some ways. So it wasn't long after that I came up with the idea of the Sect. Now, also around that time too, I was late to get online, and initially I thought, okay, this is going to be great. You know, I'm going to be able to connect with other satanic or left-hand path type practitioners. But when I got on Facebook and some of these other forums, a lot of these people were complete assholes because they had this misconception that being a Satanist means you should be adversarial. And they didn't know the difference between being adversarial and just being a fucking troll.
Absolutely. No, that's a big thing in the scene.
Yeah, I didn't dig it at all. So I thought, okay, an educational foundation for newcomers, people who had, let's say, the Black Plague, who were taking that first step on the left-hand path, but maybe didn't know all that much. So it was November 1st, 2011, we started the Sect, and basically the rest is history.
No, that's awesome that you've kind of tried out quite a few different things until you found what felt like home to you, and what felt like home to you was bits and pieces of all of these things that helped build who you are, but ultimately you forming your own organization that was the right things of these ideologies and of these theologies, and cutting out the bullshit, as you said, because that's one thing that you find a lot in Satanism is just straight assholes that think like my thinking is the only thinking that there is no give, there's no leeway, and they're not realizing that that's not, you're not being who you think you are. You're just being a troll, as you said. And I like that. I like the fact that you tried to break away from that, form something that if someone has that inner spark, that inner black flame, that you can help cater to that and maybe kindle that to really see some advantages from that. Because a lot of people get started in this that would be great practitioners, but they don't know where to turn. And they either get into the wrong organization that ruins it for them, or they learn the wrong way, or they end up just quitting because they can't get, headway. They can't seem to make the ground that they want to, so they end up just backing out and they go back to their original childhood religions like Christianity, or they just get out of it altogether. And it's a shame because there's so much to be had with following this path in a right way, and there's so much inner doorways that can be unlocked and power to be had if you dig deep enough, and a lot of people put down the shovel before they get there.
Exactly. So many people, and I've noticed they would ask simple questions. These people are new. They're new to the path, and they would ask basic questions, but they would get ripped a new asshole by some of these people. And I didn't understand that. You know what I mean? Well, there's a difference between asking a simple question and asking a really stupid question. And most of the time, these weren't even stupid questions people would ask. They would ask basic questions because they really wanted to learn. So, but at the same time, we're not like really up for, coddling people.
There's that fine line, I think, that you can't. I can't hold your hand and walk you step for step. I can point you in the right direction. I can't hold your hand, right. But I'm also not going to spank you the first time that you ask for advice, because it doesn't help anybody. And I agree. Even still, on so many forums and so many groups and online, someone is truly seeking knowledge, and they put a heartfelt question that maybe seems dumb to someone who's been doing this path for 20 years, but at one point, you were that person, and people forget that. And you look at I see people looking at that person and leaving the rudest of comments. That's not helping their growth. It's not helping them want to continue. If anything, it's making them want to say, well, you know what? Fuck this path. I'm just going to walk away from it. And that's a shame, because maybe you didn't have that person that helped you, but it doesn't mean you can't be the bigger person to help that person and make their transition easier. Because especially if you and I, we grew up in a Catholic background, it's a pretty extreme change, from one path to the other, and it's a scary territory to branch into, because not only are you changing and giving up on what you've been taught, but there's a lot of times, it was actually one of the next questions I was going to ask you, is there's a lot of times breaking of family members or friends that you lose during this transition because they just can't understand that transition. So one of the questions I was going to bring up to you is, do you think someone that is a devout left-hand path practitioner and someone that is a devout Christian can remain very close friends and make that work, or do you think it has to just be more of an acquaintance, face value type thing?
In my case, now my family, for instance, they've always known Tommy's creepy. I'll put it that way. They've always known that. So this doesn't surprise them in the least. For instance, I have a sister who was raised in a foster home as a Seventh-day Adventist, and if you're familiar with them, they're very cultish. And her and I are extremely close. And I'm still close to now that I think about it, my Jehovah's Witnesses aunts and uncles. They don't know what I'm doing.
It might be for the best in that case.
Yeah, in that case, So, yeah, but I think it really matters where the heart is. You know what I mean? Where you connect with the other. On a deeper level, stuff like this shouldn't matter that much. You know what I mean? Even though it's very much, it is more than, let's say, a belief or a philosophy for me. It is a lifestyle. It is who I am innately. As LeVay says, you are born a Satanist, but I'll add in, you have to choose to take the path. And I chose the path over 40 years ago. So, yeah, if like I said, it depends on where the heart is. What your connection is with that other individual. If it's on a superficial level, who cares? But if somebody really loves you and really cares and so on, it doesn't matter.
I agree. And I think it's also choosing to know when to speak your mind and when not to, because same thing, I was always in my family known as kind of the creepy weird one. Everybody's always like, Garrett's a little different. And they're all pretty devout Christians or Catholics, and they know that obviously I am not. Now, it's not something we really talk about when we get together on the holidays.
Right.
We see one another and spend time as a family. It doesn't really come up. I know that they're very devout churchgoers, and they know that I certainly have my own extreme views, and it just really doesn't come up. Now, I find that that's easier with family. I mean, obviously it's family, but sometimes there's definitely a lot of friendships over the years that have vanished because, funny enough, you would think, it's a lifestyle, as you said, through and through. I mean, this is what I live and bleed.
Right.
But I know when to just keep my mouth shut and say, you know what, if I speak my mind right now, I'm not saying I would hold my tongue, but there's no reason to purposely say my views to someone I know that's just going to be offended whenever I do have a friendship with them. But I often find that on the Christian side, it's not the same case. They have a much harder time holding their tongue than we have holding ours.
Yeah.
And it's ended a lot of friendships, unfortunately. But you know what? Actually, I shouldn't even say unfortunately, because if you were that offended by my life choices of what I choose to believe in and how I live, then it's probably best that you're gone anyway.
Yeah, luckily, most of my friends throughout the years have been, I guess, somewhat atheistic. They were like in punk bands or goth bands, and they either lean toward the darker aspects of existence or just weren't believers at all. So I can't, to be honest, I can't really think of any friendships I've lost because of being on this path.
Well, that's a good thing.
But I do know, like I mentioned, my Jehovah's Witness aunts and uncles and cousins might not be too crazy about this. If they knew little Tommy was in charge of a satanic cult, if you will.
I don't think they would probably approve too much. Quick side story, folks, if you're listening out there, this is one of those stories that my mom and some of my inner family will still laugh about sometimes, because, as I said, I was kind of the wild one and the weird one, and Jehovah's Witnesses used to knock on our doors frequently in the town that I was from, and they would, do you have time to talk about Jesus Christ and Yahweh? And they would read their little pamphlets. And one time they knocked, and I just got out of the shower. Now, I'm covered in devil tattoos. I have giant devil pentagrams on my back and satanic crosses and 666 all over me. So my tattoo and ink's pretty extreme. And they knocked on my door, and I answered the door butt-ass naked with all these devil tattoos all over me. And he was standing there, and he was holding his pamphlet. I said, "Can I help you?" And he didn't know what to do. And I said, "You here to talk to me about God?" And he said, "Yeah." I says, "Go ahead." And I just stood there. And this kid, I give him massive credit, because he was a young buck. He stood there and he read me the scriptures of God to obviously a satanic man standing butt-ass naked in the doorway. And then as soon as he was done, I says, "Thank you, but I'm not interested." And I shut the door, and it was fucking hilarious. But if you're listening out there, buddy, good. Obviously you're not, but if you are, good job to you, man. That was dedication.
Yeah, good for him. He
stuck true.
Wasn't hypocritical. Yeah, he stuck it out. See, yeah, there's another aspect too of I've grown frustrated with modern Satanism, if you will, what Satanism has become ever since LeVay's death, pretty much. I still have respect for the Church of Satan and LeVay's tenets and so on and so forth. But I basically, and now Peter Gilmore, I understand his frustration with these new satanic organizations popping up. You know what I mean? Because it is, in a sense, watering down LeVayan philosophy. I get it. And especially what the Satanic Temple is doing. I call that right-hand path Satanism. So I get it. And also the young, angry Satanists. Now, getting back to, Christian loved ones or whatever. When I am in their homes, I show them respect. Otherwise, I won't go there. Agreed. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna sit there at Thanksgiving, and fondle my pentagram, and start yelling "Hail Satan" just to piss them off. That lacks class.
It does.
Because I'm not out to convert them. You know what I mean? And I'm not out to shock them. That, to me, that's petty. And I see that often in the satanic community. Also, here's an example. Now, living in Northern California, we had to deal with a major wildfire that came through here and actually destroyed the winery that we lived and worked on. And we lost everything. And it also destroyed a church, which was across the street from the winery. It was an old church, like 160 years old. For California, that's old. And actually, I found that kind of depressing. And recently, they rebuilt it. But due to COVID, they're unable to have the congregation to come in. And actually, my wife and I, we were going to go just to welcome, this new church, I guess to the community. It's like good for them. That's their theology, that's their belief. Of course, we're not going to say, hey, the church, the Sect of Horn God's giving you a big thumbs up, but just be there as as a neighbor. You know what I mean?
And I think that's the right way of doing it, though. I mean, that's my thing, and I've always been a lot of different than a lot of the other people that I've known in the left-hand path, because I don't automatically shoot down another theology or religion because they're different. And I know everyone on this side seems to want to slander and bash and destroy Christianity. Yes, I don't agree with 98% of what is said in that book and what is taught in those churches or those temples, but it doesn't mean that I am going to do everything I can to destroy them. They can believe what they want. As you said, I'm not out to convert them. I am me. I'm not out to shock them or put them in awe. What I do is I do me. And there are people over time that say, you know what, I would like to learn from you. And I am able to teach these people. But I don't seek them out. They seek me out. And that's the way it should be, because you're talking to deaf ears otherwise. And like you said, to welcome a neighbor, hey, you might not believe in what I believe in, but welcome to the neighborhood. I'm sorry to see about the old temple or the old church, and I agree. Whether it's something that's opposite of us or not, to see an old beautiful building like that, and a lot of churches are beautiful, it's a shame to see it burn. I know, and then there's a lot of people that are probably listening to my show right now are like, oh, you sell out. Because there's some people that listen to my show that are complete opposite. They think that every church in the world should be burned down. They think that any type of cross should be burned. And I'm not one of them, folks, so you believe what you want to believe, but that's not my bag. In fact, I made a pretty public statement not too long ago. There was a few followers in some of the circles that I was in who openly promote destroying graves, destroying crosses, and destroying any type of monument that has any type of Christian symbolism on it. And I'll be honest with you, whether anybody agrees with me or not, I'm not fucking for it. If I catch you, destroying a headstone or a memorial for a family member or friend of mine because there's something Christian associated with it, you're getting fucking dropped. I mean, that's how it works. And I know there's a lot of people that are not into that. Oh, it all needs burned. That's not me. I'm very far left. I believe 100% in Satanism, but I don't believe that you need to destroy the opposition's memorials and monuments to prove your point. Just do you.
No. It's like if someone's a vegan. I can give a shit what you eat. Just don't try to force me to, eat your diet.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. You know what it is? These people, they're still at the starting gate. They're still reacting to mommy and daddy. They're still pissed off at their parents. They see their parents having lied to them and so on and so forth. But the parents didn't lie to them if their parents believe this stuff.
Good
so they
point.
got to get over their anger if they want to progress down the path. Quit stomping up and down at the starting line and start working your way down. It's all about gnosis. It's about knowledge. It's about progression. It's about bettering yourself.
You nailed it, though. I mean, that's it. I think people are angry that, like, oh, I was forced into this as a child. I never have looked at it in a negative sense that I was raised Catholic. I don't think that that's a bad thing. In fact, I think if it wasn't for the knowledge that I gained of Christianity and Catholicism, I wouldn't be where I am now on the left-hand path or have the respect that I have overall. So I think it certainly helped shape me. I never understood being so against it. Don't be mad that you felt like you were a sheep as a child. Be mad that because of that, it raised you to be a wolf.
Yeah, exactly. Now, with us, you had read, I guess you had got the info about the sect off the Sect Facebook page?
Yes.
Is that where you got it? Okay. Now, we've toned down the atheistic aspect to a certain degree. Because to me, being an atheist is like not believing in, I don't know, goblins or unicorns or whatever. It's no big deal. You know what I'm saying? And also, a lot of, especially modern new atheists, they are like those new Satanists. They feel so persecuted. You know what I mean? It's like they're angry. Their atheism is based on their anger at their parents also. So, yeah, that bio, if you will, is a little older. We still technically aren't, let's say, theistic, but we're open to deists, if you will. We're open to people with, an open mind about possibilities and so on and so forth.
And I think that's the right way to go, because, I mean, one of the big differences from the old bio to myself personally is me and you were both on the left-hand path, both Satanists, but I am a theistic Satanist, and I know that the organization started out as atheistic, but I am, as you just said, certainly open to any type of ideas or new things that I learn and say, well, you know what, I never had thought in that manner before, or I'm open to look at it a different direction. I don't think anyone should be set so in stone in one direction that they're never willing to budge. But I mean, there is different viewpoints, and I know for myself, and I can only speak for my reality, when working a lot of these currents, some of the things I experienced, I don't feel that there was a way that it could have been from myself, that it had to have been an exterior being of sorts, but I have heard some very strong cases of why it very well could have been me in an inner current. So, like I said, I have to be open and look at it from both standpoints, because I think it's just true arrogance to not look at something from both perspectives.
Exactly. Now, I've grown tired of the atheist-theist debate.
Yeah, it's constant.
My thing is, okay, you have the atheist, you have the theist, and there's like, the way I see it, there's like a third choice. And that would be, okay, the archetypes. Now, Carl Jung believed that the collective unconscious was a place, if you will, almost like a separate dimension. And human beings are conduits. One analogy I gave, this might be in a video, I don't know, that human beings are kind of like volcanoes, if you will, and you have, objective reality on the surface, and at certain points, I guess you could say, the what's down there bubbling within the collective unconscious comes to the surface, and that's what we are. And within that collective unconscious, you have the archetypes. And the archetypes send out their avatars. For example, there's an archetype. The horn god archetype, for example, would send out, you'll say, Pashupati or Kurnanos or Pan or Faunus or whatever. And it would hit different people, different cultures, different ways, hence giving them that name. So, is that psychological? Is that metaphysical? Is that interdimensional? I don't know.
Well, I like that you brought that up, because that was actually one of the questions I had planned tonight. Is normally I'll ask from a theistic standpoint, what is your thoughts on the belief that all these deities are the same exact current and being, and it's just a different. It's just the same being with a different mask on. But I was going to ask you tonight the same question from a different perspective, that if they all are inner currents, does it just portray itself differently to different people?
Different cultures.
Different cultures, different backgrounds. And does it wear the different masks to bring out different inner currents? So if one calls Belial compared to Asmodeus, is it really just the same thing, but it's giving us different perspectives of that current? And that's where I'm open to it, is I believe they are individual things, but maybe those individual things certainly are all the same thing. I mean, it really, that's why the debate of, theist or atheist is flawed, because you can argue all day, but I think both of them equally have as much backing, and I think that if you're open to it, there doesn't really even need to be a debate.
And it should be more about what you get out of it.
Correct.
To me, the left-hand path is about empowerment. You know what I mean? It's about finding the light in the darkness, the paradise in hell, if you will. That's the important part of it. What is it doing for you? How is it bettering you? So many people like to think, okay, since I'm a Satanist, I'm my own God. Oh, really? You're your own God. You work at 7-Eleven. You still live in your parents' basement. You know what I mean? You're 46 years old. You're your own God. I doubt it. You know what I mean? It takes a little more than, it takes a little more than that. You know what I mean? It's a process. That's it. Let's call it. I like to call it sinister enlightenment or sinister illumination. That's what you want to reach. You know what I mean? The Agori of India, who I'm absolutely fascinated by. Now, some people have a problem with Indian or Eastern left empath. They think it's vastly different from Western left empath, and of course, some of the practices and so on are. But the basic goal is pretty much the same. The Agori aren't trying to be one with Shiva. They're trying to be Shiva.
Yes.
They're trying to be a god. They chant, "I am Shiva." Now, imagine a Christian getting up in a church and starting to chant, "I'm Jesus." They're going to haul that fucker away.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in their tradition, they can do that, and they dress like Shiva. They hang out in the amongst the funeral pyres, as Shiva supposedly did, and they act out what Shiva is to try to reach that godhead, that godly-like state. And when they eventually do, it's said that the sensation they have, or that enlightenment they have, is more or less like when a person is at the end of their life and they're dying and they know they're dying and they finally reach that acceptance. You know what I mean? Let's say in the final months, where they finally reach that enlightened contentment. That's supposedly the Agori's enlightenment.
And it's fascinating because, as you said, they are similar in certain ways. They are different. Now, a great book is, I would advise anybody to read it, is Lords of the Left-Hand Path. By Stephen Flowers. It's amazing because it describes both sides of it, and as you said, it's you strive to be Shiva, and there's one step away. Is you have a lot of people that strive to return back to the Godhead and become one with the source again, to go back to the bornless one. What is described in this book is the thought of getting to that direction and taking one step over. So instead of returning back to an ultimate consciousness, you reach the level of godhood, but then you don't let it absorb you back in. And I love that. You have reached that full enlightenment. At that point, you should be absorbed back into the cloud like everybody else and become one again. But you say, no, thank you. No. I'm going to go ahead and just do me now. And then you're endless.
I am Shiva. Exactly.
I am Shiva. Exactly. So, no, that's a powerful thing. People, if you're listening out there, read that book. It's an awesome book.
I'd recommend that to anyone who's new on the path. More so than the Satanic Bible. I would recommend Lords of the Left-Hand Path first, then the Satanic Bible, and then other,
I agree, because I think that's going to give you a very vast understanding of the roots of the left-hand path, because I don't think people realize that it didn't start over here. It wasn't something that started with LeVay. LeVay certainly made it very large, but it had been around for hundreds of years, and it started in other parts of the world under different presets, and it's grown into something completely different as it come over here. But I think that would kind of give you perspective, and then you start to pick up things like, the Satanic Bible, and start to work in some of LeVay's workings, like satanic rituals and things like that. You can start to dive down that path, but I think that should come later, and unfortunately, that's pretty much everyone's first book. I mean, I got to be honest with you. When I was 16 years old, I bought a copy of both the Satanic Rituals and Satanic Bible, and that was my first dive into the left-hand path. And I went, balls to the wall after that. But that was most people's starting point, and it's a good one. But I think there are better ways to start, and as you said, Lords of the Left-Hand Path would be one of them.
Yeah, and then try the other, the works of Michael Aquino, for example, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? Just let it vary, and then eventually branch out into give Gurdjieff a read. check out Eastern left-hand path practices, and so on.
Absolutely. Now, you just brought up a good point. Something I wanted to actually touch on tonight as well is we talked a little bit about them tonight, a couple different times now, diving in and out. But as far as influence to you, I know that obviously LeVay had a heavy influence on you, but when it comes to their individual workings, and I asked this to Martin McGregor on our very first interview that we had on the show, if you had to pick the most influential out of the three, between Antoine LaVey, Michael Aquino, and Aleister Crowley, which do you think's work affected you the most, from a intellectual and open your mind standpoint?
Wow. They had different effects. I would probably, maybe Crowley, just because of who he was. And he was the one who really kicked open that door that allowed everyone else to come through. Even though, like I'd mentioned earlier, he was really confusing for me. It took me a while before I finally got him.
Shit, he's still confusing to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects of him still confusing. But with him, it's like reading him is kind of like reading poetry. It's more, don't try to rationalize it, instead experience it, if that makes any sense.
No, that's actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so in some ways I would say Crowley, but then again, look, I don't know.
It's a difficult question.
That's a tough one.
Because, like you said, they all bring different aspects to it. And I think, kind of dipping back into one of the last statements we made, Crowley would not be, and we've already said that tonight, but Crowley would not be a place that someone starting out should dive into.
No.
In fact, that might be one of those dead-end roads for a lot of people starting into it, because, that's the thing I see, is people glorify Crowley so much that it has had an effect on people starting to dive into this lifestyle, and right away they recognize the name, they know a little bit about him, so they think that that's where they should start because he's this big icon, he's this big figure. And then they pick up their first book, like the Book of Lies, or the Book of the Law, and they start to read it, and they're like, what the fuck am I reading right now? And then they close it, and they never read it again, because, be honest with you folks, if it's your first read into the occult, or even your first read into Crowley, you are going to just stand dumbfounded. It takes several. It's one of those things, you read a page, you go back, you read that page again, and maybe even a third time, and then you move on to the next page. But it is profound. There's a lot of great knowledge to have in there, and they all affect you in different ways. Even Aquino, I think, has some very great perspectives and work. I think, like you said, they've all influenced me in different ways, but it's good to hear that Crowley kind of, they all opened the door a little bit, but he kind of threw it open.
He kicked it open. And like you were saying, people should not start off with him. That would be like if you want to enter the drug world and you want to do heroin first. I'd advise you to start off with maybe smoking a little pot. You know what I mean?
You work your way up.
You work your way up to the heroin or the fentanyl or whatever the hell you eventually get into.
Oh shit! No, I hear you. It's just the first time I read Crowley, and this is after I'd already been in the left-hand path or even in the occult for years. I still was like, wow, man, like, what the hell are you saying to me? And then eventually, like you said, you discover that it is like an occult form of poetry.
Yeah.
And you have to get how he means it and what he's trying to tell you. And then once you kind of get yourself into that groove, then you start to ride the wave and you're good. But it takes you a little while to get in there. You don't just pick up a surfboard and start riding a wave. You have to practice first.
Yeah, it's like reading Shakespeare for the first time. That language is just, what? But then as you get into it, you kind of pick up on the rhythm, the flow, the cadence of it all. I
agree. Just like I said, it's powerful.
Yeah, and I would recommend, like I was saying, Israel Regardie, who was Crowley's, I guess, pretty much his last secretary or whatever. Now I think Regardie died in the 70s, so he was writing up, maybe in the 80s. He was writing up until that period, and he would, in a sense, make Crowley understandable to the layman, to the beginner practitioner or whatever. I would recommend him if you want to understand Crowley. It would be like if you get into Gurdjieff, I'd recommend reading Ouspensky so you can understand Gurdjieff and so on. He's not as easy to. It's not like LeVay. LeVay is pretty blunt, and you know where he stands, and you know what his point he's trying to make. His language isn't all that flowery.
I agree. Yeah, it's just kind of cut, dry, and forward. I mean, it has still power behind it, but you don't have to be, a genius to read it and understand the words. You're going to be okay at all skill levels to at least pick up something from it, where that's not the case on the other side.
Right.
And I agree, Israel Gardy definitely helped bridge that. He was kind of the bridge between those worlds, and he did a lot for the magic community as well. I mean, not only with helping with a lot of Crowley's works, but obviously with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, he released some profound, which, I mean, both he and Crowley kind of are looked at in two different lights from Golden Dawn members. Some people praise them and some people demify them, because obviously Crowley did take a lot of the knowledge that he gained as a member and a leader of the Golden Dawn, and then formed Ordo Templi Orientis, and I think really caused a huge wedge between the magic communities there. But at the same time, you know what? Things have to happen. Shards have to break off to form new things.
Sure.
And I think, both organizations. I mean, I was a member of the Golden Dawn, and I believed heavily in their practices, and I still use them on a pretty consistent basis, because even though I do practice the left-hand path, I still work heavily with, and I don't look at angels and things as right or left. I look at these entities as you can work them no matter what path you're on, but I learned to work Enochian magic and angelic magic from Golden Dawn, and I still do it quite often. I like keeping the presence of both daemons and angels, whether they are entities themselves or they're a part of me. I like vibing with them,
or they're that third alternative.
Exactly.
Or they're that third alternative, like I like to think of, aspects, avatars of the archetypes, whatever the archetypes are.
Yeah.
So
no, and I like it. It's certainly some thought-provoking things, and I think there's probably a lot of people out there saying, wow, I didn't think of it, like, these different... Because there's a lot of people that follow it, but they don't follow it. And kind of like you said earlier, touching back on basis of that, is I think that there's a huge portion of left-hand path, and I'm doing like the rabbit ears with my fingers, no one can see it, but Satanists, so many people I meet that'll say that they're a Satanist, or they'll promote themselves online as a Satanist, but when you ask any type of actual knowledge from them, there's none to be had. I post pictures of the Baphomet, I post pictures of Satan and of other random demons and daemons, and I put Hell Satan, and that's fine. I guess that's its own version of being a Satanist, I guess, but yeah, who am I to say what Satanism is? But there isn't that philosophy, whether it is theistic or atheistic, or the third alternative. There isn't that. There is no knowledge behind people. I think, like you said, it's just that high school devil worshiper. I'm mad at my parents, and I'm just going to try to cause outrage and post on Facebook, hell Satan, hell Lucifer. And it's sad, because I think that is what ruins the scene. And one of the things I was going to ask you is, what do you think the biggest misconception from someone not on this path is when they think of Satanism? Because that's one of the things I think of, is I think of these assholes out there that don't actually follow Satanism, but they pretend to, and they are what give everybody else the bad name, thinking they're burning down churches and shit, and that's not who we are.
Yeah, exactly. That the biggest misconception is that the left-hand path is all about evil, when it isn't. It may delve into darkness, but it's not cut and dry evil. Now, it may be, it's very antinomian and transgressive, whatever, but pure evil for the sake of evil, no. It's about personal growth, personal independent growth, in a sense. Even though I have an organization, still we like to stress the fact that we present the tools to the individual, and then it's up to them to progress down the path. We're not going to hold anybody's hand. But the biggest misconception is this idea of pure evil, and it comes from those little idiots that, burn churches and kick over gravestones and crosses and so on and so forth, and yell at their mommies and daddies. And it's those kids, it's them that will never grow on the path, and most of them will find their fat asses back in a pew again,
and
praising the
I'm
Lord.
Glad you said that, because that is actually what almost always happens, is these assholes tarnish our path, and then they go right back to the same shit that they started out with, the same churches they were burning down they're sitting in. And I never quite understood that. And you
begging the Lord for forgiveness.
Begging, I burned his damn church down. No, I'm asking him to forgive me. Damien Ball wrote a book called The Satanic Narratives, and it's a short book, but he kind of describes his version of Satanism, and he says that same thing, that I will steer you and help you down that direction, but I won't hold your hand, because even though, as you said, even though you have an organization, it is an organization of like-minded individual leaders, and that's what it should be, is people who stand on their own as their own pillar, but together you can do great things. You don't need one another, but that you find one another because of the more power and things that you're able to accomplish, but it's not something where it should be holding their hands and raising them. You raise yourself, you open your own doors and grow from it, find the light in the darkness, but we're just a guiding force to it.
See, for me, it's the difference between being a pack animal and a herd animal.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Those on the left-hand path who like to be with others of their ilk, they're pack animals. They're not the herd. The herd's easily frightened. The herd has the sheepdogs, circling them, keeping them in place. The pack is a little different,
Yeah, no one's really a leader in the herd. They're all just kind of just sticking together. Whereas the pack, every one of them is a leader, but they like to stick together because you like those of your own kind. So that certainly makes sense to me. Now, before we dive further into anything, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors real quick. So I'm going to take my first step aside here and give a little bit of a highlight to one of our sponsors. First and foremost, I want to talk about Limitless Liberation. Elena's company was inspired by both Lucifer and Belial, and Lucifer has been with, I'll read it as her perspective. Lucifer has been with me most of my life, as far back as I can remember. Belial and I started to work when I was going through a very difficult part of my life. He completely turned mine and my family's life around for the better in a very short period of time. In return, he asked me to create Charger for him. He showed me the design, so I created the first Charger for Belial, and Lucifer wanted one next. From there, I had spirits lining up with requests for magical items. Some are control freaks, others will just inspire. They are also individually different, but every single item created has power within it. Each item operates on many levels. They operate as an anchor for the spirit you're working with, thus aiding easier connection between the two of you. They also operate like a power cell or battery, where they already come with an inherent energy to them, but they become stronger and as you feed them and pull from them during your rituals, as well as strengthen your workings. Limitless Liberation continues to grow to honor the spirits we work with and love to build relationships with. And you can check out Elena's work at etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. And one more time, that is etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. And I do stand certainly behind her work. It is gorgeous. Every single piece is tailor custom made. It's individual. It's unique. You feel the power when looking at it, which is kind of a rare thing to look at something, over the computer that's a ritual implement and say, wow, like I can feel the power coming off this thing, and you can. And that's exactly that. As she described it, it is a altar battery. that it will charge your works. And if you work with specific entities or you want something that's just a common charger for your altar, it'll do that. And it will certainly heighten your senses and heighten your work as you're working. So it's a very important thing. And what I'm going to do a little bit differently tonight, I'm also going to go straight into Goetic Impressions real quick instead of taking a second break. That way me and Tom can go ahead and just finish out the rest of this here after I come back. The second sponsor of mine is Goetic Impressions. And Goetic Impressions formed as a partnership between Ben, who is Frater Adamastro, and Sor Alara, with the intention to bring ritual-accurate magical tools to the public for affordable prices. One of the largest barriers to entry for new practitioners looking to experiment with the magic of the Western grimoires is how expensive and difficult to find ritual tools are. They first launched with a Kickstarter to bring their Goetic medallions to life, and since then have also expanded with an Enochian toolset, and most recently a Satanic medallion and altar set, which is currently live on Kickstarter. With over 20 years of magical and occult experiences across a range of traditions, Goetic Impressions is the place to find affordable, high-quality ritual items. You can check them out at www.goeticimpressions.com, and again, that's www.goeticimpressions.com. If you're looking for a promo code to get a good chunk knocked off your order, message me personally on Knights of the Nephilim Facebook page, and make sure you add our page. I will give you a promo code for 10% off of your overall order, but that's only for those that like the Knights of the Nephilim Facebook page and send us a message on there, and I will hook you up with 10% off your overall order through Goetic Impressions. Thank you so much, guys, for everything you do for the show. All right, folks, so we have been hanging out for 1 hour exactly with Thomas LeRoy, who is the owner and founder of the Sect of the Horned God. We've been talking over different influential icons in the occult world. We've been talking over our philosophies and thoughts on this path and what made Thomas into who he is today. And we still have a good bit more. Now, I want to dive, secondly, into the sect itself and ask you, what do you look for in someone wanting to join your organization, and what do you think, and I know we briefly touched base on this, but I want to dive a little deeper, what do you think someone looking at your organization would find in it to benefit them as a practitioner, a solo practitioner joining a organization?
To begin with, I want somebody who's curious, who really wants to progress on the path. Because if you just want to scream and yell and stomp your feet, there are plenty other groups you can go join. But if you want to progress, learn, try to become a better you in a sense, because I think that's what's missing in a lot of these, let's say, satanic organizations. They're not about self-improvement. They're more about, like we talked earlier, more about the angry angle of it all. I want people who are open to ideas, who want to grow. And what we basically have to offer is, okay, we have what are called the 4 lower orders. Now they are the order Pan, Kernanos, Prometheus, and Dionysus. Now you progress up these orders. Now the first order is, let's say, basic Satanism, left-hand path philosophy, whatever. And then that's Pan. And then Kernanos is the history of the occult, more or less, Western left-hand path occultism. And then you have Prometheus. Now, Prometheus is a little different. Prometheus is where we kind of check to see where your head's at. Do you understand how objective reality works? Do you have the ability to reason? You're just not let's say, like we mentioned earlier, a herd animal that's just coming through. And then we have Dionysus. Now, Dionysus is where you get into Jungian philosophy, psychology, I believe Nietzschean, and so on and so forth. It it delves into the subconscious. So you go from rational to, in some ways, irrational. The rational in Prometheus to the less rational in Dionysus. And then once you pass those 4 lower orders, you become what's called a Cenobite. Now, the term Cenobite, now Clive Barker didn't originate that with Hellraiser. It's an ancient term.
Absolutely.
And then when you become a Cenobite, you then enter, you have to be chosen to enter what we call the Order of Shiva. And that's when we get into the actual work. That's when you start delving into, let's say, aspects of Crowley and left-hand path Hinduism and so on and so forth. What I call this practice, or what this practice is called, is Sinisterism, eclectic left-hand path. It's no longer Satanism. Now, like I've said, I've grown frustrated with Satanism. I'm still technically a Satanist, as codified by LeVay. It's just who I am innately, like you're a introvert or an extrovert. I'm just innately a Satanist. But I came up with this term sinisterous because it comes from the Latin word sinistra, meaning left-handedness. So if you don't fit within a specific paradigm and you kind of take from all these different aspects, you would be a sinistrous. And that's where we're going within the Order of Shiva. And we don't really reveal the work to the public, let's say. It's done in a very private manner. But anyway, that's the basic structure of the sect. And you can go as far as you want, or you can hang out in some of the lower orders, or you can simply hang out in our Facebook groups or the website or wherever. It's up to you how far you want to go. No one's being pushed. And at the same time, we're not holding anything.
No, I love it. I mean, you give the opportunity to certainly push yourself, as we all should be, to better yourself and better yourself within the organization and grow, to learn more, to get more opportunities. Or you can choose to make it so far, and that's all the further you want to go, and you can hang out there and stay there. It's up to you how far you want to progress. And in a culture that, you're not being judged, you are not being talked down on, or that you have to feel you're stupid if you want to learn or ask a question. And like you said, you even have the free Facebook group that people can go to and to learn from, and talk amongst one another. So I love that. I love that you're doing something that you don't see a lot of people doing. As you said, there are a lot of satanic groups or Satanism groups out there. But as you said, so many are focused on the anger aspect and the outrage and the shock and awe. And here's my thing. Maybe once upon a time, if you asked me when I was 18 years old, 19, 20 years old, but that's not where I'm at anymore. In fact, I look for the peace. I honestly am. I've come so far along my path that I don't find a need to get angry. I don't find a need to be outraged. I look for being tranquil and absolutely serene, and that's where my happiness is. So it's the opposite end of the spectrum, and like you said, I think that just means that they're at the beginning of their journey, because if you want to live in anger and outrage, then you're going to have a pretty shitty life, whereas if you learn to master these currents and work with these currents, you eventually find that there's no need for such silly things, and you have the life you always wanted, and that's true Satanism, and that's true left-handed path, as we said, to become Shiva. So I think we're all pushing forward, or at least those that are smart enough to, and I love that you're doing that with your organization. Yeah,
my whole thing is I have plenty of friends who they're like, for instance, I'm friends with Michael W. Ford, who writes great books and is very much a practitioner of ritual magic and so on and so forth, and I love it. I freaking love it. Me, I I'm more into the psychology of it all. Why are we doing this? And what can we really get out of it? And his working helps us get something out of it. You know what I mean? But that big picture. And then I like asking questions like, what was the genesis, using a biblical term, of all this? Who was that original ancient shaman or whomever who like etched that horn god on the wall or whatever, or looked at that etching of a horn god on the wall and said, I don't want to pray to that fucker. I want to be that son of a bitch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Questions like that intrigue me. I've always been the type that likes to go down deep and find the roots of it all.
And I like
so,
that.
Yeah,
I think that's missing a lot these days. Is you have I don't think, and we kind of talked about between the theistic and atheistic how there's that middle ground. I think that's the same thing between practice and theology. That you have a lot of people who ride that theology side solely. And they don't worry about the practice side, and they have a lot of people that do the practices or the rituals, but they don't really dig into the background of how everything came to be, or really dig into the psychological standpoint of themselves. I like to ride the middle personally. I only speak for myself, but I am definitely a ritual practitioner.
Sure.
But I definitely dig heavily into the background, the history, and the inner psychology. I think that they're kind of the yin and yang. They both need to be together to really discover some of those doorways. But yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Like my friend Michael, what he does is very necessary to our practice, and I love how he's keeping that alive. Ritual magic and so on and so forth. By the way, he'd be great on the show.
I messaged him actually. So Michael, if you want to get back to me, he's seen my message. He didn't answer me, so maybe I'm not there yet where he wants to come on, but hopefully he will want to. I would love to bring him on. I've read a few of his books. I've followed his work for a few years now, and I think that would be an awesome interview as well.
Yeah, we took part in a Left Hand Path conference up in Portland a couple of years ago, and that's where we met, and we became fast friends. We liked each other instantly. My wife said, you guys were practically holding hands and walking away together.
That's good when that happens, though. It doesn't happen often.
Yeah, when you can connect with somebody almost right away. Because what had happened? Okay, we got this hotel room. All the people participating in the conference were all staying in the same hotel. And I saw Michael briefly when he and his wife pulled up. And then I said hi, and then I went into my room, and then my wife left the room, and she was gone for like 45 minutes. And I went, where the hell did she go? And she came back, and she goes, oh my God, I just met Michael and Hope Marie, and we were standing in the hallway, and we talked for like a half hour, and it was you guys you're gonna love him. So yeah, I got to know him, and yeah, outstanding guy. I recommend him highly for this show.
Well, great. Hey, next time if you guys talk to one another, if you want to plant that seed, I won't deter you from doing so. I did reach out to him. We have talked back and forth very, very briefly on comments on posts before, just randomly in the scene where we've left comments and he's answered mine or I've answered his. But I did send him a message on it. He's seen it, but I did not get a reply. Like I said, I know he's probably a pretty busy guy. Guy's got a shit ton of books out there.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe at some point he will want to jump on here. Would love to have him. I think we would have a lot to talk about. But no, from what I've seen, seems like a very influential guy, and that's great to hear that he's down to earth and a good guy as well.
Yeah, very much so. Not jaded in the least.
Yeah, because there's a few people that have great work that I've met that are just complete tool bags. That I'm like, you write great fucking books, man. I love your books, but in real life, you just suck.
Yeah, too full of themselves. Like I don't think I wouldn't want to have met Crowley. I can imagine him being highly unpleasant.
I agree.
I wouldn't mind to, observe him from afar, but actually, like spending time at the Abbey of Thelema, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about all the weird shit that went down there. I think I might pass on it. You know what I mean?
Getting fucked by a goat and slashing its throat and shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, just me personally. Hey, whatever you're into, it's just not my bag. But I wouldn't have minded to certainly meet LeVay. I think that would have been pretty cool. I think even Aquino would have been pretty cool to meet. Every time I look at him, he reminds me of like the Grandpa Munster off the Munsters, with his crazy eyebrows. But I think both of them would have been cool to meet and sit down and have a talk with. But I actually do agree with you fully on Crawley. I've always looked up to his work. I've always liked his work, but at the same time, I've always found him to be just a little bit too bizarre to want to sit down and hang out with.
Yeah, LeVay would have been fascinating. One of the higher ups in the sect, Jake Block, was an administrator in the Black House. Actually, he worked directly for LeVay for years.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's kind of our connection to the old COS. Like I said, I understand Peter H. Gilmore's frustration, like what's going on with the Satanic Temple right now, and what they're doing to Satanism. Or it's highly frustrating. That's why I've sort of stopped calling myself a Satanist and more a sinisterist, because of that frustration. Because a lot of people think, well, you're like the Satanic Temple, because now the Satanic Temple in some ways has become more popular than COS, and that's a crime.
It has.
And I know a lot of people say Satanic Temple are not Satanists, but LeVay didn't make up that term. And their excuse for their Satanism is they're based on old mid-19th century Parisian Satanism amongst the Bohemians and so on and so forth. Those who were sipping absinthe and writing bad poetry and so on. That's their version of Satanism, they say. But really, they're just a political organization.
It is, and I've actually always steered clear myself, but I do bump into a lot of people that will tell me that they're into Satanism, and then they'll pull out their little card that they get whenever they pay the $50 online, and they're like, "I'm a member of their organization." I'm like, "But are you? But are you really? Do you actually go to their masses?" And at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. That just isn't Satanism to me. But to each their own, I guess. Like I said, everybody got their own beliefs in it. But I kind of agree with you on the fact of I am a Satanist, but I steer clear on a lot of the acknowledgments of that these days because of how these different sub-organizations or the radicals of the groups really do tarnish the overall look. That it gets frustrating having to describe over and over and over again to someone who doesn't understand it what our version or what our ethics and morals are behind it. To explain that I'm not out doing evil and horrible things. To explain that I don't believe in the same political sides as others out there. It just gets frustrating. So sometimes I just steer clear of it. I'm like, I'm just a left-hand path practitioner. That's how I just go by that. I'm like, I'm just into some radical shit that you're not into. I don't feel like explaining.
And it's all about personal growth. It's about your personal growth.
It is, and I mean, it's been tremendous. I mean, I think if you're in the side of the lifestyle and you're not growing, something's wrong. Yeah,
it's like the analogy that somebody who wants to understand what the left-hand path is, the analogy I would give is, okay, you have the right-hand path. That is a nicely paved path that's lighted, and at the end of that path is a big old fat guy sitting on a throne who's going to give you a big hug when you reach him. The left-hand path is you saying, fuck that nice paved road. I'm going to cut through the foliage with a goddamn machete. I'm going to take a shortcut. I'm going to go up to that throne. I'm going to knock that fucker off the throne, and I'm going to sit my ass on it.
Exactly. And that's it. I don't want that hug. I don't need that hug. No. I don't need that paved road. I'm gonna go for the scene, because that's the thing is I think too many people focus on trying to reach the end point without worrying about the journey. And I think the journey is part of it. And just to be able to walk up the clean path, I mean, that's great, I guess. But I think the obstacles are what make us who we are. So for you to just walk up a clear path to the throne, that's nice and all, but throw me into fucking Jagger bushes. Let me cut my way through it, because, it's going to be a hard time. It's going to be a trial in life that you have to get through, but those trials are what breed excellence. And
exactly. You learn more from failure
than
you do from success.
I think the best way to learn is failure, because if you make a massive mistake, you're going to say, well, damn, I'm never going to do that again. But if you succeed doing something wrong, then you get arrogant and say, well, I can do shortcuts all the time because I didn't get caught, or I got away with it, or it worked. And you keep doing less than you're able to reach. Whereas when you fail, you say, I need to be better and do it better next time. So it's a complete opposite thought pattern there. And I would rather fail and then learn from it and strengthen myself, because we are, strengthening ourselves to become gods, to unlock that inner God and to achieve those powers. And I mean, we all have our different methods of doing it, but what matters is the fact that we are reaching in and trying to unlock that.
Yeah, and it's very Nietzschean. It's that, whatever doesn't kill you. Like the catastrophe that happened to my wife and I, we had a matter of minutes as this wildfire was coming through. And like I said, it was my wife and I and our dog. And first off, the winery. Okay, the winery is absolutely stunning. It looked like a little Tuscan village, European village. And we called it the Abbey of the Horn God. And we even had a member of the Sect of the Horn, another member of the Sect of the Horn God, individual called the Dark Fool, was living on the property. And we had other members live there throughout the years. But anyway, we had, just matter of minutes to get the hell off that property as that fire came roaring through, destroyed everything.
Wow.
And then the growth. I mean, after that, it wasn't fun, but you learn from that. You don't wallow in the self-pity. Instead, you grow from it. It makes you a better person. You find, like I said, you find hell and paradise. You find paradise and hell.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You find the light in the darkness. That, to me, that's a big part of what the path is.
I agree 100%.
You deal with these, you should learn to deal with these situations. These situations should not get the best of you, but you get the best of it. And that's what the path should help you do.
It's climbing up that ladder. Every time you get over one of those hurdles, you are now one rung farther up the ladder than you would have been. And so many people, like I said, don't want to climb it because it's not easy. It's not fun climbing that ladder, so I'm going to skip it. Or so many people have that trial in life that hits them, and instead of getting back on the horse and riding off into the sunset, they say, fuck it, I'm not getting back on that horse and I'm done. And that's one way of doing it, but those are the people you see on social media or in life that are constantly complaining about how bad their life is because they never had the drive to take it by the horns or take it by the reins and control it, and to learn to adapt and grow with it. They let it control them, and that's where you fail. And I think yourself, myself, your organization, it helps put people out there that say, fuck this, I'm taking life by the horns, and I'm going to be that God. I'm going to run this. I'm going to have that self-growth. And let's face it, it's rare. I mean, it's a gem. It's a hidden gem. It's digging through shit to find the pearls,
Yeah, exactly. Looking, finding that pure gem in the middle of all this muck and hell, if you will.
No, agreed. Well, folks, if you're listening out there, learn something from that. It's something to be said that you can give up. It is very easy to give up, and certainly it's hard to carry on. But the more you push, the more you will reach different levels of yourself that you didn't know you had. If you look, I'm speaking for myself. If I look back 7 years ago to where I was then to compare to where I am now, you wouldn't know you could reach this much growth in life, let alone in 7 years. And it would have never seemed possible. It would have been easy to just sit down, lay down, and die at that point. But didn't do that. And I'm nowhere near where I want to be. I won't stop until I'm Shiva, like I said. So that's just, it's all about your drive and where you want to go in life and what you want to learn. But it's a matter of learning and self-growth. And as Thomas said, you can choose to take the golden path. There's nothing wrong with that. If you choose that, then hey, that's okay. But if you think you're one of those ones that want to grab a machete and start hacking away, there's a lot to be learned, and certainly his organization is one of the ones out there that can help you grow and learn that path, and you can check them out at thesectofthehorngod.com, and once again, that's thesectofthehorngod.com, and on there they do have a registration you can fill out to be considered for possible membership. They have a lot of different information and other great pieces of info and writings on there, so make sure you check out their website. Check out their group page on Facebook to be able to talk to one another and conversate. And you can also check out their like page on Facebook and make sure you give them a like. These guys got 27 or 28,000 followers on their Facebook page. So you can tell they're not just some fly-by-night organization. They're not just somebody that's just, fucking off and not taking this seriously. To have that many followers, you have a dedication and heart behind what you do. And it means a lot to me personally as a host, as a black magic practitioner, as a Satanist of 18 years, 17 years, that there are good people still in this scene that not only help themselves but help many others. So Thomas, thank you, because like I said, there's a lot of shitheads out there, but it's nice to meet someone that's genuine.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. This was outstanding. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely.
Most of the time I forgot that we were even airing this. You know what I mean? I just got lost in conversing with you, and I'm honored to do so.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me. That's what I try to bring that I hope stands out to people is that, folks, if you're listening out there, none of this is planned. This is all as you hear it. And I always am very humbled and honored that my guests do always say it feels like just two friends talking on the phone. Thomas and I have never spoke before tonight. But tonight was the first and hopefully not the last, and I think we made friends and acquaintances with one another, and it always feels very comfortable with my guests that we're like longtime friends reconnecting. So I really appreciate you giving me your time tonight, and especially since your hours are a lot different than mine. I mean, it's midday there for you and Kelly, so thank you so much for coming on. And before you leave, the last couple things I always ask my guests, the last three things actually, is first, what advice would you give to someone starting out in the path that is just completely lost right now and has absolutely no idea how to begin, what to do? What is the one valuable piece of advice you'd give them?
Read Lords of the Left-Hand Path.
If you take anything from tonight's show, that is it, because it is a phenomenal book.
Pick that book up.
Pick that book up now. If you can't find the book, or if you're one of those people, that just right now don't have the money to pick that book up, message me. Maybe I'll hook you up with a PDF. I don't normally agree to send other people's works out for free because I want to see them get money, but this is one of those gems that I feel that if you truly want to start the path, I'll spark that fire. So message me and I'll hook you up with a PDF of it. Secondly, who is it that you would like to thank out there? Is there anybody special that you want to give a thanks to?
My beautiful wife, as always. She's the soul and inspiration of the Sect of the Horn God. She does she's in charge of the, how should I say, the office work, if you will. So
she makes it happen. She's keeping the lights on. You're just the face.
I can be the artist. I can make the videos, and definitely check out my YouTube channel, Thomas LeRoy.
You should, because you got some great videos on there.
Yeah, and also I'd recommend some of my videos for newcomers to the path. Also, I have some pretty decent introductory type videos. Not too deep, relatively short, kind of get to the point. So
No, that's perfect. You heard it, folks. Check out their website, as I mentioned to you earlier, at the sectofthehorngod.com. Check out Thomas's YouTube page, their Facebook pages, and any other websites that they might be on, because honestly, folks, it's getting too damn hard to remember all these websites that are popping up these days. Everybody's got like TikTok and all these other weird fucking things I don't know anything about. But check them out. If they're on it, make sure you follow them. Thank you so much for listening out there, folks, tonight. Make sure you tune in. We are going to have a week off next week for Thanksgiving, so there will not be an episode next week. The following week, we are bringing on occult author Arundel Overman to talk about Solomonic and Grimoire magic, everything from the original books of Solomon to the Grand Grimoire and Red Dragon to the Grimoire Verum and everything in between on a ceremonial aspect. So make sure you check that out. That is the first Thursday of December. After that, we're mixing it up a little bit. We're bringing on Wilmore Tall, which we're working out the time zone difference because it's like a 17-hour time difference. But he is coming to us from overseas, and he's going to be talking to us about gnome magic, which I'm actually very excited for because I don't know nothing about it. So normally I'm pretty in tune with the things we talk about on this show. I don't know much about gnome magic, but he has some great ancient context talking about the magic of gnomes. So we're excited to bring him on. Following week, we got John Vermillion to talk about his books. I recently picked up Asaya Kailuxa, which is a phenomenal work of unlocking the inner God and connecting to the Godhead. So very interesting, and we look forward to talking to that. So you got some great episodes coming up. Amazing past episodes already out. Don't miss a goddamn thing. Make sure you click the like, share, and follow button. If you want to see us do something different, if you like what we are doing, you want to leave feedback, anything like that, you can drop me a line at celestialoddities at gmail.com. Again, that's celestialoddities at gmail.com. That's our other radio station on the paranormal, where we talk over everything from aliens to cryptids to ghosts and everything in between. So make sure you check out those shows, hit us up with an email, and make sure you like our Facebook page. Other than that, that's really about it. Thank you to the fans that were tuning in tonight. We did have some comments going on, but nothing specifically asking a question of Thomas, so we didn't read those off. But thank you to the people who have been leaving comments during the show. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. And Thomas, once again, appreciate your time coming on tonight.
Yeah, it was great, my friend. I'm looking forward to doing it again. Absolutely.
You'll certainly be back. Don't worry. We'll work something out. All right, folks. We will catch you next time on Knights of the Nephilim. I'm Frater Crow, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.